Aaron O'Toole is the former leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. He's a veteran of the Canadian Armed Forces, also a distinguished fellow specializing in international trade at the Hudson Institute, and he's with me in studio. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Matt.
What do you make of this plan?
I think it's a good first step. The defense industrial strategy is something Canada's needed for some time, and the rupture the Prime Minister talked about in his famous Davos speech shows why we can't rely on the United States. We became lazy relying on the United States for our national defense, for our sovereignty, and we're going to have to do a lot more ourselves and do a lot more with new allies, our allies in NATO and Europe. So I do think the plan has some ambition to it. Build, partner, buy. We're going to build first. So Canada first, build that industry as David and Bernard, your guest, showed. And what is great, Matt, we have been innovators. We were the first to have an autonomous drone. That was an early Bombardier development. Now look at how important drones are. We were the first to have an autonomous subsurface drone as well out of a business in British Columbia before Kraken. Kraken, who you spoke to earlier, is a world leader in this autonomy under the ocean. Well, we've got more coastline than any other country in the world, Matt. So we should be getting some of their technology into our Arctic. So I think there's great potential. There's a plan now. There's a commitment for the long term, and that will also let private industry invest their money to complement what the government is doing.
What will show you that the mindset is different, such that companies like Kraken don't sell 90% of their gear elsewhere. That's what, I mean, whether David says he's being polite or not, that's kind of at the heart of what's going on here, right? That we haven't thought about it in that way.
David's comment about changing the mindset is 100% right. We didn't have the mindset of making sure we had our own capacity to do these things. And for decades, it didn't seem like we needed to. The Americans were not just our ally, our friend, our neighbor. We leaned on them, and increasingly we leaned on them way too much. But I used to talk about this during the pandemic, Matt. When the crisis hit, we couldn't even get N95 masks that were made in Michigan sent to Windsor. You could have delivered them by bicycle. But when there's a crisis, whether it's food security, whether it's a health crisis, whether it's war or strife like we're seeing in Mexico, you have to be able to count on yourself first. And Canada has tremendous capability, but we haven't had that self-reliance since World War II, really. So we're rebuilding that. I think this DIS document is a good first step.
But what will show you that the mindset has changed? Again, Bernard talked about how the timid, idea is no longer required. That we have to think much more aggressively and boldly. What will show you that that's actually happening?
Well, we need purchase orders. So right now, there's been studies, there's been new agencies. So Prime Minister Carney likes to create new agencies to do what old agencies weren't doing. That has me worried because we're falling into the Ottawa bubble trap. The thing that will show industry that they need to invest more and that Kraken can hire more people in St. John's, Newfoundland, is purchase orders. So we need to start showing that we're going to walk the talk and buying Canadian. And so this buy Canadian, this build component of their platform, saying 70% of what they spend. And Matt, by 2035, this is hundreds of billions of dollars over the next decade. They need to start this now to show people that they're serious, because I do a lot of work in Europe, and a lot of people are saying, well, what about if the midterm elections clip Trump's wings? Canada will not spend any of this. A lot of people don't believe we're actually going to follow through.
Really?
So if the government actually starts showing that seriously, they've done that a little bit. They bought some aircraft from Bombardier to replace the aging Challenger jet. But they have to do this across the board and make sure it's not just Bombardier CAE. We have a couple of world-class companies. We need to develop the ecosystem beneath them and have our own supply chain.
Let me just ask you in the couple of minutes that we have the political question here, which is, you've hinted at this. This is going to cost a lot of money. This is a significant investment. And that's money that presumably Ottawa won't spend on other things. Do you think Canadians are prepared for that?
This is a really big decision that Canadians have to realize, that these investments are needed because we can no longer rely on the old structures, the rules-based order.
Do you think the Canadians believe that? One of the reasons why the military was chronically underfunded was because funding it was not a political vote getter for a lot of people.
You're right. It will change, voters' mindsets. But if you look at some of the polling, Matt, Canadians are worried about the U.S. I just read in the Globe this morning, they see the U.S. as a risk. A majority of Canadians, as almost a super majority, they know we can't rely on that. So polling seems to show that they're willing to spend a lot more on defense.
Polling is one thing. When money is not going into the thing that you want it to be spent on, though, whether it's healthcare or there's a long list of everybody wants a piece of that pie. When it's not going to that and it's going to this, how do you make that case?
Well, going back to, I'm praising Mark Carney too much these days, but the build, baby, build mindset that he brought in, we have to leverage our resource wealth. We were leaving parts of our economy, Matt, on the sideline for far too long. And if we are going to build this sovereign capability, this capacity, if we're going to have more presence in the Arctic at a time where other countries are just going to ignore our sovereignty unless we're up there more, this will require spending. It will require decisions. But if we're also growing parts of our economy that were not really supported under Mr. Trudeau, that gives us flexibility. But the government will have to make tough decisions. This is a priority. Safety and national defense, these are things we never had to consider as fundamental, and they are fundamental in this world of rupture, as the Prime Minister outlined.
I have to let you go, but do you worry that maybe your friends in Europe are right? That if the midterms in November don't go the Republican way and Donald Trump's way, that the stomach for those big decisions perhaps may not be there in Ottawa?
I tell everyone that we've seen the world change, and we cannot allow short-term decision-making to change the fact that Canada needs to be more self-reliant. So even under the Biden administration, we weren't getting a lot of policies that were favorable to Canada. We have to be able to build up a lot of capacity for national defense, for sovereignty ourselves, and we have the ability. We are great innovators, Matt. We've just never bought enough from ourselves to justify these countries doing more at home. Now we need to. This is the first step. Let's get it done.
Aaron, thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Aaron O'Toole is a veteran, former leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, distinguished fellow specializing in international trade at the Hudson Institute. He was with me in our Toronto studio.